The orbital command chamber of the Corellian Spire station shimmered in its artificial gravity shell, panels humming low with power, light shifting through spectral hues along the curved ceiling. Around the central projection table, warlords of 6 species stood bristling with armor, horns, biometal, and ceremonial blades. Some glowed, others clicked, a few pulsed unsettlingly. Queen Virelli of the Alari leaned back in her high-backed chair with the practiced elegance of a monarch born in battle, her elongated ears twitching slightly with boredom. She traced one sharp finger along the hilt of her weapon, half listening to the rhetoric of a Zarnax general who spoke like he was swallowing sand. She'd fought machine fleets before, scorched storms, neural rot viruses, hive seeds, but this new threat was worse, fast, adaptive. The parasite logic of their AI evolved between breaths. They didn't just want conquest, they wanted consumption, and now they were spreading toward the soft planets. She sighed, gesturing to cut the Zarnax feed. Enough. We've wasted half the orbit arguing about whose fleet smells more threatening. Show me Earth's contribution. A murmur rose. Some chuckled. One of the Hawkeye generals clicked a mandible in what passed for laughter. The console pinged and the image rotated, zooming in on the back corner of the room where a single human sat. He wasn't slouching exactly, more like occupying his chair as if the concept of formality had never been invented. His uniform was technically standard issue, though the sleeves were rolled up unevenly, and there was a coffee stain on the chest. He looked tired, not battle-worn, tired, more like shift at the diner, tired. Name? Virelli asked. Mason Cade, a voice replied. The human raised a hand without standing. Present. She blinked. That's it? Mason smiled faintly. I can wave again if it helps. The laughter returned, louder this time. Someone muttered about Earth sending a maintenance technician instead of a soldier. Virelli narrowed her eyes. She'd requested a representative for Earth's forces, a soldier, a strategist, maybe even a specialist. What she got was a man who looked like he'd just asked for the Wi-Fi password. She stood and walked slowly toward him. The other commanders parted. She stopped 3 feet from him and studied his face. Mason Cade. Rank? Staff Sergeant, he said, taking another sip from a clear pouch labeled Lunar Java, extra bold. She tilted her head. Your file says you led the repulsion at Series 9. That was a high casualty zone? Mason nodded. Yup. Didn't like it much. You're their best? She asked. He shrugged. I'm who they had available. There was an audible gasp from someone behind her. Virelli didn't look away from him. She was trying to decide whether she was insulted, amused, or genuinely curious. There was something off about his eyes. Not dull, not tired, focused, deep, like someone watching the room from behind 10 layers of thought. She turned back to the others. This is Earth's protector, she said, her voice sharp with mockery. They laughed, Mason added helpfully. She spun back, surprised. That's the title, right? He said. They laughed. Then the human soldier stood up. Sounds like a motivational poster. The silence that followed was not comfortable. Virelli's lips twitched slightly. Are you mocking me, Sergeant? Not at all, Mason said. I mock titles. People usually come after. Before she could respond, the chamber lights shifted crimson. A tone rang out. Incoming transmission. Emergency code. Virelli turned sharply, gesturing to the projection table. A battlefield rendered itself in full 3-dimensional light, the hues flickering with distortion. A scout ship, Ilari design, was under attack in the Tarsus Rift. Drones, machine origin, swarming it from 3 angles. Fast, coordinated. Dispatch Valkyrie Wing, she ordered. Another officer spoke. There are 4 sectors out. The closest vessel is Earth's Rook 7 corvette. Virelli grimaced. Mason, can your crew assist? He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he leaned forward, watching the projection. Your scout ship's leaking signal compression. The drones are triangulating off the chatter. Her brow furrowed. How do you know that? Because I built part of that relay system during a contract job in 38. Bad encryption layering. We warned the Alari rep back then, but he said Earth tech was primitive flair. Mason stood. He moved toward the table, tapping a corner to magnify the flow lines. If I get authorization, we can pulse jam their carrier wave and buy your scout a 10-second burst to hyper out. Just 10 seconds, Varelli asked, almost taunting. Mason smirked. 11 if they're drunk. The humor was thin, but it cut the tension. Varelli stared a moment longer, then gave the nod. Proceed. The chamber watched in strained silence as Mason took a comms pad, barked a few rapid orders to his ship's AI, and rerouted a signal. The drones twitched mid-swarm. The Alari scout ship bolted into the void, disappearing in a flash of blue-shifted light. It worked. Someone clapped. Someone else muttered, "Lucky." Mason handed back the pad. "We'll send you the bill for the jammer. Just don't say primitive on the invoice." Varelli folded her arms. "You're not what I expected. I get that a lot. You don't fight like a soldier. I haven't fought yet." She stared at him for a long time, her ears slowly tilting forward. "You know," she said finally, "some of these warriors train since birth. Carry honor scars across 3 generations. What do you carry, Earthman?" Mason looked down at his stained shirt. "Coffee, mostly." A ripple of laughter spread through the room, genuine this time. Varelli didn't smile, but something in her shoulders relaxed, just a little. As the meeting wound down, the generals dispersed in clusters, whispering about the unexpected human. Varelli remained at the projection table, reviewing scans. Mason lingered by the refreshment unit, wrestling with a malfunctioning dispenser. "Need assistance?" she asked. "It's fine. I'm winning." The machine sputtered and spat out a crushed ration bar. "Victory," Mason said. She approached slowly, stopping at his side. "Tell me, Earthman, why are you really here?" He took the bar, unwrapped it. "Because they sent me." "That's not an answer." "It's the only one I have." She turned away, her voice low. "This war will burn worlds. I've seen worlds burn. And still you joke?" "Because if I stop, I remember them all." She paused, looked over her shoulder. "And when the real fight begins?" Mason bit into the bar. "Then I stand up." The command deck of the Rook 7 swayed with the low-frequency vibrations of jump recalibration. Lights dimmed to blue standby glow as the vessel coasted through the silence between pulses. Mason stood alone near the secondary viewport, arms folded, watching the stars blur into streaks that snapped back again in erratic rhythms. His expression was unreadable, calm, distant, like a man who had gotten too good at not showing much of anything. Behind him, the crew was bustling. Ilari tech advisors, 2 Earth liaison officers, and 1 Yarnathi engineer with a strange habit of humming operatic overtures while fixing hull panels. They moved like people trying very hard not to talk about what had just happened in the council chamber. Mason had just saved a Royal Scout ship, alone, with a jammer protocol hacked together from outdated Terran code and elbow grease. It hadn't gone unnoticed. "You're pacing," said Lieutenant Voss, his second-in-command, sliding up beside him with a datapad, "which in your case means either the ship's about to explode or you're pretending it might to get out of the next meeting." Mason took the pad, scanned the latest diagnostics, then handed it back. "I'm not pacing. I'm waiting for the universe to get its punchline ready." Voss raised an eyebrow. "Punchline? You don't think it's funny?" Mason asked. They spent a week arguing about ceremonial formations and gravity symphony frequencies, and then we fixed their scout ship with a glorified hairdryer and a rock. "I don't think that was a rock," Voss said. "Well, it did not work." A comms chirp interrupted them. Incoming transmission encrypted with a Lari royal seal. Mason exhaled. "And here comes the Queen," he muttered. Queen Varelli's voice filled the space, like cold wine being poured into hot metal. "Staff Sergeant Mason Cade, you are requested for tactical debriefing aboard the Vareth Talon immediately." Mason blinked. Immediately, or the polite kind of immediately where I can grab a sandwich first?" "You will be brought by shuttle in 7 minutes," and she said. "So not the polite kind," Mason sighed. Voss clapped him on the shoulder. "At least try not to imply that her battle plans need more duct tape." "No promises." The Vareth Talon was less a ship and more a floating cathedral to war. Obsidian plating, banners of flickering starlight, and halls wide enough for armored beasts. The shuttle touched down in one of the smaller hangars, and Mason stepped out to the sound of synchronized boots and ritual horn codes that sounded like someone strangling a brass moose. He was met by two Illyri guards who towered over him, both stone-faced and elaborately tattooed. One of them glanced at Mason's boots, which had a faint smear of breakfast rations on them. "Do you require footwear polishing?" the guard asked stiffly. "I require better breakfast," Mason replied. "You offering?" The guard blinked once and said nothing more. They led him through winding corridors into a room that wasn't so much a war chamber as a performance piece. Varelli stood at the center of a giant star map, planets orbiting slowly around her like she controlled gravity itself. Her long ears were adorned with new battle rings, and her expression was one of deliberate curiosity. "You've caused a stir," she said as he entered. "Usually takes me longer," Mason said. "Might be a new record." She stepped down from the dais, circling him once. "Some say you're a spy. Others say you're a weapon." "I'm just a guy who wants a nap," Mason replied. Her head tilted slightly. "And yet you understand our enemy in ways no one else does." "How?" "Because I've seen it up close," Mason said, his voice softening. "Before Earth joined your alliance, they hit one of our colonies, ripped it apart. We lost communication after 7 hours. I was part of the recon team that went in after." She stopped circling. "What did you find?" she asked. Mason looked at the floor. Nothing that looked like home, but a few things that still had names. "I remember because one of them was scratched into a wall. Come back soon, Dad." Varelli didn't speak for a long moment. Then, "And you've hunted them since." "When I can." She looked at the map. "We have tracked a hive node near the Bracari Wastes, a forward swarm, small but fast. Too fast. They are learning how to dodge our pulse mines before we fire them." "They've probably adapted to your frequency range," Mason said. "You use harmonic resonance strikes. Beautiful, but predictable." Her eyes narrowed. "You studied our weapons?" "I study everything," Mason said. "Occupational hazard." She waved her hand, shifting the map to a new sector. "Then you will lead a joint unit. One of my tactical officers will accompany you." Mason raised an eyebrow. "You're sending one of your people with me?" "I am sending myself." He blinked. "That seems excessive." "I bite. Ask anyone." She ignored him. "Your unit leaves within 1 cycle. You'll be briefed en route." "Do I at least get a cool code name?" She turned to leave. "Don't push your luck, Earthman." The next hour was chaos dressed as preparation. Mason coordinated with Voss, parsed through half-corrupted sensor data, and discovered someone on the ship had programmed the cafeteria AI to insult humans in 73 languages. He left it running. The team assembled on Deck 6, half Illyri, half Terran, and all of them looked at him like he might sneeze and ruin everything. Varelli arrived last, clad in matte armor, with blade points etched in star glyphs. Her gaze silenced the room. Mason stepped forward. "All right, listen up. We're going in fast, we're going in quiet, and we're probably going in underfunded. Try not to get eaten, and if something starts glowing, it's either about to explode or about to propose marriage. Both are bad." One of the Illyri blinked. "Is that a human combat maxim?" "No, it's just Tuesday." They launched into Slipstream with little fanfare. Outside, the void loomed. Inside, Mason leaned back in his crash chair and closed his eyes. Varelli, seated across from him, studied him in silence. "You joke too much," she said. "It's either that or scream," he replied. "And when the jokes run out, then it gets interesting." The swarm didn't wait. It never did. The moment Rook 7 dropped out of Slipstream into the Bracari Wastes, the void cracked with kinetic detonations and high-frequency distortion waves. It was a trap, but not a dumb one. This wasn't just brute force. It was choreography. The enemy ships moved like a school of hungry fish, forming and reforming mid-flight, drawing them in. Mason stood braced against the bulkhead of the forward observation deck, watching the patterns, the pulse lag, the curve of their maneuvers. "We're being herded," he said into the comm. "They're boxing us toward the dark band. Don't go past grid theta." Varelli's voice answered, sharp and calm. "Confirmed. Illyri wing in formation. What are they hiding in that band?" "Something they don't want flying," Mason muttered. "Hold your secondaries." On the main display, the first enemy wave came close enough to scrape the hull with EM static. The impact alarms wailed, lights dimming briefly. One of the Jarnathi engineers yelled something about the coffee maker shorting out again. Mason ignored him. He turned to Voss. "Tell the helm to cut all comm pings. Run silent. Just thrusters and hope." Voss hesitated. "They'll think we're dead." "They already do. Let's use that." The ship dipped, rolling sideways into the edge of the dark band. Light bent in unnatural ways. No stars. Just shadow and pressure and the faint hum of something waiting. Mason keyed open a frequency on the back line, a simple old analog tone, and heard something squelch in reply. "There it is," he whispered. Varelli appeared behind him, armored and impassive. "What did you find?" "An anchor. They're tethered. Something big, buried deep. That's why they fight so hard here. It's not a swarm, it's a nest." "You want to burn the nest?" "Number want to cut the tether." She nodded once. "What do you need?" 30 seconds of distraction, 3 decoys, and someone to keep the idiots from powering up the ship's jazz radio again. "I will lead the strike team." Mason blinked. "You're a queen. Royalty doesn't usually volunteer for suicide runs. Royalty that hides does not stay royal for long." The plan was crude and probably illegal in 7 sectors. Voss piloted Rook 7 toward the far edge of the band, decoy emitters flaring to life with outdated Earth pop music as the swarm twisted to follow. Mason and Varelli dropped from the belly of the ship in stealth harnesses, falling in absolute silence toward the enemy signal hub. It wasn't a ship, it was a living construct, a dead asteroid hollowed out and filled with thrumming tendrils and chrome limbs, all pulsing to a signal that made Mason's skin crawl. They landed hard, silent, on a dark plateau. Mason immediately started jamming pulse lines into the surface, reading signal depths. Varelli crouched nearby, weapons drawn, eyes scanning the mist. "They're under us," he said. "Not ships. Not yet. Storage. Pods. This place grows them." "We destroy it," she said. He hesitated. "It's sentient." She glanced over. "Does that change the mission?" "I'm just wondering if we should at least insult it first." A low vibration started underfoot. The surface began to open like a jaw. Mason didn't wait. He triggered the charge sequence and bolted, dragging Varelli with him. The plateau exploded upward with shrieking light as pods erupted from their sockets. Some malformed, others disturbingly humanoid. One looked like a twisted imitation of an Alari face, eyes too wide, mouth drawn back in an endless scream. Mason tossed a charge into the open socket and hit detonate. The sky rippled. The tether snapped. Across space, the swarm faltered. Ships stopped mid-flight. Some spasmed and collided. Others just drifted, like wasps losing the scent of the hive. On the Rook 7, Voss whooped over comms. "Swarms falling apart. Target scattering. They're blind." Back on the collapsing asteroid, Mason and Varelli sprinted for the edge, vaulting over pulsing cables and twitching limbs. A swarmling leapt from the dark, claws wide. Varelli didn't hesitate. She met it mid-air, driving her blade into its chest. It howled and dissolved into static. They reached the edge just as the Rook 7 dropped back into view, hatches open. The retrieval beam flared, pulled them upward. Inside the bay, Voss met them with a thermal blanket and 2 survival bars. "You're bleeding," he told Mason. "I'm always bleeding. It's my baseline now." He took the bar, chewed once, then spat. "This tastes like regret." Varelli peeled off her helmet, her hair damp with sweat. "Nest destroyed. Signal lost. Warfront pushed back." Mason nodded. "We just bought the galaxy a breather." She looked at him. "You fought like a soldier. You expected less?" "I expected more coffee jokes." "I'm pacing myself." In the following days, things settled faster than Mason expected. The Council gave their speeches. Systems rejoined the Outer Alliance. Earth got 3 medals and a stern letter about unauthorized deployment of weaponized sarcasm. The war wasn't over, but it had changed. The swarm wouldn't be adapting fast enough anymore, not after losing their signal anchor. Mason stood again in the council chamber, this time at the front, not in the corner. He wore the same uniform, still wrinkled, still with the faint stain from that cursed ration packet. But this time no one laughed. Virelli approached him after the final address. Her ears twitched softly as she stopped at his side. "You were overlooked," she said. "Used to it." "Not anymore." He turned toward her. "So what now? Back to fighting?" "Eventually," she said. "But for now, the Alliance wants you on diplomatic outreach." "Oh, good. More speeches." "They want you to explain how you understood the enemy." "I didn't," Mason said. "I just paid attention. And I cared." She nodded. "That's more than most." He scratched the back of his neck. "Do I at least get a title this time?" She smirked. "You already have one." He frowned. "Wait, are they seriously calling me Earth's protector? That sounds like a cartoon. Better than coffee-stained chaos technician." He grinned. "That one's got a ring to it." They stood in silence for a while, looking out at the starfield projection of the next sectors being secured. There was more work to be done, but for once the galaxy wasn't laughing at Earth. It was listening. And Mason Cade, who once sat invisible at the back of the room, stood now where everyone could see him. Not louder, not grander, just seen. A man with 3 first names had once sold him the ship, swearing on his 4th that it was a galactic gem in disguise. Bryn Calder would later swear in return, on every bolt and wire, that the only thing disguised about the Rust Bucket Serenade was its ability to remain airborne. At any moment it could give up the ghost, sputtering out in a magnificent display of poor life choices and unregulated engine grease. He was drifting along the edge of an unregistered star graveyard when he picked up the anomaly. The nav scanner pinged with the kind of excitement usually reserved for lottery winners or black hole alerts. Bryn sat up from his nap inside the captain's chair, which doubled as a massage recliner when you hit the console just right. He tapped the screen. The signal pulsed back. A derelict ship, big, rich-looking, spinning lazily in the vacuum, like it had all the time in the world. "No distress signal," he muttered. "No life signs. Definitely haunted." He cracked his knuckles, tossed the remainder of a half-eaten protein bar into the airlock. Out of principle, not sanitation, and hit the thrusters. The rust bucket protested with a whine that sounded vaguely like a goat being emotionally manipulated. But it moved. The ship in question was old, possibly royal, and had too many fins. Bryn had learned long ago that the fancier the fins, the more useless the vessel. Probably Thalathari design, one of those regal species with too much gold and not enough common sense. Still, salvage was salvage, and he wasn't above dressing in a clean shirt to impress dead monarchs. He breached the airlock manually, because automation was for rich people and living ships, and entered with his helmet sealed, flashlight attached to his shoulder, and a crowbar that had sentimental value. The corridor was dark, untouched, cold. Not spooky exactly, just the sort of quiet that made your own heartbeat feel like a drum solo. Rooms passed. Furniture hovered midair. Decorative walls flickered with energy sigils, long dead but still whispering about better days. He followed the trail toward what looked like a containment vault. That's when he saw it. A pod. Not big, not imperial, just sleek, tucked behind a fractured wall. Its glass surface was fogged, but the stasis field around it shimmered faintly. That meant power. That meant a find. That meant maybe he could finally pay off that debt to Krollo the Limp, who had stopped accepting excuses and started accepting fingers. He wiped the glass with his sleeve and froze. Inside was a woman. She looked human, or close enough that his brain filled in the gaps. Pale skin, black hair, and ears that curved long and elegant above her head like biological tiaras. Not a scratch on her. Stasis preserved. Sleeping. "Oh no," Bryn whispered. "I found a space princess. This is how it starts. Next thing you know, I'm sword fighting a cyborg over an asteroid." He should have walked away, logged the coordinates, sold the info. But something in her face stopped him. Not fear, not fragility. Strength. Even sleeping, she looked like she might wake up and slap destiny in the mouth. With the delicacy of a man disarming a live snack machine, he activated the pod's release. The hiss of the seal broke the silence like a gunshot. Lights inside flickered. The shimmer faded. She didn't move. Then, with the sharpness of a predator and the grace of royalty, her eyes opened. She sat up in one clean motion, grabbing his crowbar with reflexes that suggested far too much training, and slammed it into the wall beside his head. "Whoa!" Bryn shouted, hands up. "Welcome back to consciousness. You're very, coordinated." She blinked, looked at the crowbar, looked at him, and frowned like she'd just discovered a soggy sandwich in her glove compartment. Her voice came next, low, melodic, and absolutely incomprehensible. She pointed the crowbar at his chest. "Okay, I'm gonna guess you're asking who I am. I'm Bryn. I'm not trying to harvest your organs. I found your pod. You were frozen. I thought, hey, free artifact. And now here we are, you threatening me with my own crowbar." "Wild day." She stared, then said something short, sharp, and presumably insulting. Bryn slowly reached into his belt pouch and pulled out his universal translator. He turned it on, holding it out like an offering to a judgmental god. "Give me a sec. This thing's got a lag worse than galactic customs." The device clicked, whirred, and spat static. Then her voice came through, rough and clipped. "Where am I?" "Well," Bryn said, leaning back against the nearest wall, "technically on a salvage mission in the corpse of what looks like your old ride. But don't worry, I've got a ship. It has character and a toaster. You'll love it." She narrowed her eyes. "You removed me from the stasis vessel." "Gently," he added, "with care, and possibly some accidental elbowing. Look, you were in a pod in the middle of nowhere. I didn't know if it was malfunctioning, and you looked a bit too not dead for a salvage piece." She rubbed her forehead. "How long?" Bryn frowned. "That is a great question. Your stasis log was corrupted. I couldn't get a date, but by the look of the ship's hull decay, maybe 15 standard years. Could be 20 if your engineers like to cut corners." She swayed slightly, then composed herself, rising to full height. He expected her to collapse. Instead, she stood as though her spine had been carved from command alloy. She was thinner than she probably once had been, but her presence took up all the air in the room. The translator caught her next words. "Show me this ship. The one that smells of burnt circuits and expired preservatives." Bryn winced. "It also smells like friendship and rust, but mostly friendship." She followed him out with hesitation but not fear. Her eyes moved like she was cataloging every detail, every escape route, every weakness in his posture. When they reached the airlock, she paused. He saw her glance back once at the ruined ship. There was something there, a flicker in her expression. Pain, memory, duty, maybe. Then it vanished. Back aboard the Rust Bucket Serenade, she wrinkled her nose the second the recycled air hit her nostrils. "Cozy," Bryn said. "Used to be worse, actually. A raccoon hybrid lived here before me." She sat slowly, her gaze locking on the viewport where stars smeared across the void like spilled light. She looked smaller in his cabin, though not diminished, like a storm contained. He brought her a warm packet of food. She poked it with a spoon like it might detonate. He grinned. "First course, rehydrated noodles with a side of existential dread." She raised a perfect imperious eyebrow. Bryn leaned against the bulkhead and took a bite. "So, you got a name, or do I just call you your grumpy highness until you hit me again?" She exhaled, long and slow. "Sayara," she said. "You may call me Sayara." "Well, Sayara," he said, raising his fork in salute. "Welcome to the Rust Bucket. Try not to murder me before breakfast." She did not smile, but she didn't deny the possibility either. The third time Sayara rerouted his entire nav console without asking, Bryn considered launching himself out the nearest airlock just to get a moment of peace. It wasn't that she was wrong. She rarely was. It was that she did it like the ship already belonged to her. Like she'd simply misplaced it under a pile of space debris, and now everything must return to its proper queenly order. He found her hunched over the main terminal, speaking quietly in that old slippery language of hers to the ship's AI, which had somehow grown fond of her. Traitorous thing. It never responded to Bryn with such chirpy compliance, even when he sweet-talked it or bribed it with software updates. "Hey," he said, crossing his arms and narrowing his eyes. "Do I still live here? Or am I now the humble court jester of the Rust Bucket Royal Court?" Sayara turned without looking guilty, because guilt, it seemed, was beneath her. Your navigation system was inefficient. I recalibrated the long-range sensors to detect residual quantum signatures. You are now less likely to drift into a singularity. Thanks, Bryn said dryly. But singularities are where I keep my emergency fund. You ruined the mystery. She walked past him like a starship in motion, purposeful, indifferent to protests, and far too elegant for a place with duct tape holding three panels together. He watched her cross to the galley, open the warming drawer, and grimace at the contents with a level of disdain usually reserved for war criminals. That's protein loaf, he offered. Vintage. I think it's fermented. It's vibrating, she said. That's how you know it's working. Their uneasy truce continued for several days, during which Bryn learned several valuable lessons. Sayara did not snore, but she talked in her sleep, usually issuing commands that could qualify as war crimes. She could also disassemble and reassemble a pulse rifle in 30 seconds, clean her own wounds without flinching, and identify stellar drift patterns faster than his AI. She also once stabbed a malfunctioning food dispenser, which finally started working again, probably out of fear. Still, she was trying, in her own regal, slightly terrifying way. They sat one evening, or whatever passed for evening, aboard a drifting relic in the viewing bay. Sayara sipped tea made from something Bryn had found in an unlabeled tin that smelled suspiciously like bark. It hadn't killed them yet. Have you considered, she asked suddenly, installing a gravity compensator that doesn't sound like it's dying? I have, he said, but then I'd have to give up the part where it sounds like a whale sighing. That's the ship's soul, Sayara. She looked at him. This vessel has no soul. He grinned. Says the woman who lectures the toaster when it burns her bread. There was a pause, then, just for a breath, she smirked. It was brief, almost imperceptible, but Bryn saw it, like a moon peeking from behind the clouds of command. Their routine was disrupted, as most pleasant things are, by the sudden blaring of the proximity alarm. Bryn leapt from his chair. Sayara was already at the controls. I didn't touch anything, he shouted, diving into the co-pilot seat. I didn't even breathe weird. Unidentified vessel approaching from sublight speeds, the AI announced. Minimal emissions. No communications. No broadcast signature. Sayara stiffened. Bryn saw her eyes narrow to slits, calculating and cold. Friend of yours? He asked. No, she said flatly. Prepare to run. You mean flee, or tactically retreat? Let's call it an assertive relocation. She ignored him and typed in a burst of commands so fast the screen flickered in protest. The rust bucket serenade lurched into motion, flinging itself toward a nearby asteroid belt like a cat flung into bathwater. Behind them, the approaching ship increased speed. Okay, Bryn said, gripping the controls. Do we want to know who it is? Or are we going full mysterious past mode where you drop hints but no real answers until things explode? They are Thalathari loyalists, she said. Or they were. Now they serve someone else. Great, he muttered. You know, when I imagined meeting an alien princess. Queen, she corrected. Right, Queen. I didn't expect to be chased by space fascists. They will not negotiate. If they board us, you will die. Bryn swallowed. That's refreshingly straightforward, but also rude. He twisted the manual throttle, something he was never supposed to do because it made the entire engine room vibrate like a drunk hive of bees. The ship surged forward. The asteroid field loomed. Sayara took the targeting array and began launching signal flares into the debris. What are you? They track thermals, she said. If we scatter enough false signatures, a burst of plasma fire zipped past them, clipping the starboard wing. Sparks shot through the interior. Bryn yelped. That was my favorite wing. Then fly better. Fly better? Do you see these controls? They're labeled in 3 languages and one of them is just angry emoticons. They dove into the asteroid field, bouncing through rocks the size of small moons. Bryn had never been religious, but he began mentally composing a prayer to whatever deity governed reckless maneuvers and unlikely survivals. The enemy ship hesitated, turned back. Bryn collapsed into the pilot's seat, exhaling like someone had just extracted his skeleton. Sayara stared into the void, her jaw clenched. You okay? He asked. They will report to the others. I am no longer hidden. He reached for the emergency tea pouch. torn from its hook during the chaos. "Well," he said, "on the bright side, now I know what to write on your welcome banner. Queen of the Galaxy, likes long walks through asteroid belts, dislikes loyalist assassins." Sayara didn't answer. She sat in silence. Later, when she finally spoke, her voice was quieter. "I was meant to die on that ship," she said. "That was the plan." Bryn blinked. "That's a terrible plan." "It was not mine," she said. "It was theirs. A peaceful transfer of power. I would disappear. No bloodshed. No war." "And you were okay with that?" "I had no choice." He sipped his tea. It was awful. It felt like drinking warm moss. "Well," he said, "now you do." She didn't respond. But when he set a new course, toward a small trading post on the edge of forgotten space, she didn't object. She even adjusted the heading by half a degree, and Bryn took that as progress. The trading post on Orm 5 looked like someone had tried to build a city out of spare parts from 5 different centuries and then lost interest halfway through. It clung to the asteroid like a stubborn barnacle, flickering with neon signs and the occasional electrical fire. Bryn had seen worse, but not often. Sayara didn't flinch when they docked. She simply adjusted her hood, tucked her long ears beneath a band of fabric, and stepped into the crowd like she hadn't once ruled 20 star systems. Bryn followed, trying not to look like a guy walking beside the most hunted person in the quadrant. He succeeded for maybe 3 seconds. They were here for information. Someone Sayara insisted was still loyal to the old ways. Someone who had the codes to scramble a fleet's recognition protocols. Bryn didn't ask questions. He figured when a queen asked you to escort her into a shady part of the galaxy, you just made sure your blaster was charged and your boots were fast. The contact turned out to be a one-eyed insectoid named Vort, who sold counterfeit wedding licenses and lightly illegal cloning recipes on the side. Vort was delighted to see Sayara, mostly because she hadn't incinerated him the last time they met. "I thought you were dead," Vort rasped, antennae twitching. Sayara raised an eyebrow. "You attempted to sell me as a concubine to the Avalor Syndicate." Vort buzzed nervously. "Water under the reactor, yes?" She held out her hand. "Give me the codes." Vort complied. Bryn suspected this was not out of respect, but because Vort had survival instincts and a vivid imagination for what Sayara could still do with a shard of glass and a length of string. They left without incident, though Bryn bought a bootleg hologame titled Space Ferrets 4, The Reckoning on their way out. It seemed like a decent use of credits, and also he needed something to distract from the creeping dread that had returned to Sayara's posture. Back on the ship, Sayara explained, "If I use these codes, I can access the Central Fleet's broadcast system, override the Loyalists' false signals, reveal the truth to every ship in the Alliance. They will see that I live." "Sounds good," Bryn said, flipping the game cartridge in his hand. "What's the catch?" "They will come," she said. "All of them." He blinked. "All?" "Yes." "I think I just swallowed my tongue." Sayara paced. "They will not come for negotiation. They will come to restore order, which means removing me from power permanently." "So you're gonna surrender?" She stopped. Her eyes found his. "Number, I'm going to make them choose." They broadcast the signal from the edge of the Harul Drift, where old war satellites still blinked like forgotten gods. Sayara appeared in full regalia, seated upon a makeshift throne Bryn had cobbled together from a broken captain's chair and some glitter tape. She spoke clearly, without artifice. "I am Sayara of the Thalathari. I live, I was betrayed, and I have seen the galaxy you were promised under new rule." She detailed the cruelty, the purges, the quiet terror behind the silence of compliant systems. "I do not return to reclaim a throne," she said. "I return to offer a choice. Continue down this path or remember who we were." Then she cut the transmission. They waited. For 17 minutes and 42 seconds, Bryn tried to make tea with a cracked infuser and failed. Then the scanners lit up. "Ships incoming," the AI reported. 17 at light jump proximity, more beyond." Bryn looked at Sayara. She looked tired, but not afraid. The first ship hailed them. Its emblem was still the old crest, before the coup. "This is Commander Enra of the Vigilant Star. We received your message. We stand with the true queen." One by one, more followed. Not all. Some refused to answer. A few turned and fled. But enough remained. enough to matter. Sayara didn't cry. Bryn might have, a little, but blamed it on the tea fumes. The transition was not smooth. There were skirmishes, debates, a full day where one battalion insisted Sayara had been replaced by a clone, and Bryn had to disprove the theory by throwing a wrench at her. She caught it without flinching. They dropped the claim. Through it all, Sayara didn't reclaim the throne. Instead, she called for a council, equal voices, decentralized power, a radical thing for a woman raised among imperial relics and genetic prophecy. They offered her the crown anyway. She said no. They offered again. She looked at Bryn. He shrugged. It does come with fancy robes. She took it, but only symbolically. The real rule belonged to the people now. She just wore the crown so no one else would think to steal it. After the last ceremony, after the last oath, she found Bryn on the ship packing his tools. You're leaving, she said. I was never built for court life, he said. I don't bow well. Knees make weird noises. You could stay. He looked at her. You're not the woman I found in that pod anymore, he said. And I'm not the idiot who thought he could fix everything with duct tape. You belong out there. And you, he smiled. I belong where things are broken, preferably not trying to kill me. She nodded. You are difficult. You're terrifying. They stood there a moment longer, then she kissed him. Not a farewell, not a promise, just a moment. He left the next day, aboard the Rust Bucket Serenade, slightly cleaner now, still prone to alarming noises. He didn't look back until he hit the edge of the drift. When he did, the stars behind him gleamed brighter. Maybe it was just the new fuel line, but he liked to think it was her. He hated mining colonies. Too hot, too cold, too damp, or too dry, never in between. This one smelled like boiled circuitry and foot sweat, the kind of atmosphere that screamed, turn around and go back. Darren Holt adjusted his visor, wiped the sweat from his neck, and stared down at the fractured rock path that led into the underbelly of Draz 7's extraction field. His ship, Knucklehead, was parked 3 clicks back in a camo shell. Not because he was being cautious, though he was, but because someone had stolen his landing clearance and traded it for 30 credits and a sandwich. It was that kind of planet. The mission was simple. Extract a girl, reportedly kidnapped, reportedly human, reportedly somewhere in the eastern dig site. The words reportedly and girl did not sit well together, especially since the client had sent only coordinates in a cryptic message. Bring her back alive, no questions. Darren had been in the business long enough to know that no questions usually meant all the questions. Still, a payday was a payday, and this one promised enough credits to pay off his ship's sentient AI therapist, who charged by the complaint. A crackle in his comms. If you die, can I have your boots? Came the dry mechanical voice of Noodles, Knucklehead's onboard AI. You don't have feet. Exactly. Think how stylish I'd be. He muted the channel. The rocks here were a dull gray-brown, streaked with faint bioluminescent veins of ore. Yunkers picked over the scraps while rusted drones hovered aimlessly above them, like forgetful mosquitoes. Darren's scanner pinged. Life form ahead, small, stationary, elevated body heat. He approached the signal slowly, stepping around a collapsed conveyor belt and the husk of a mining rover that looked like someone had tried to turn it into a pizza oven. She stood in a hollow near a fissured crater, her back to him. Thin, still, wearing something that might have once been a tunic or a curtain. She held a long stick in both hands like a staff. On her head, a large metal bowl glinted in the sun, tilted at a noble angle. He stepped forward. Hey, kid, you lost? She didn't turn around. Took you long enough. I almost declared a sovereign nation out of boredom. Darren blinked. You're the girl. Define girl. If you mean the one who's being hunted by at least 3 factions and hasn't had a proper bath since last moon cycle, then yes. The ears were the first thing he noticed when she turned. Long, upward pointing, twitching slightly. Not human. Not entirely. Her skin had a pearlescent tone. Too smooth, too perfect for someone who'd been living in a crater. Her eyes, violet and unblinking, appraised him like a merchant evaluates fake diamonds. I'm Darren Holt, mercenary. You're coming with me. She squinted. Your armor's dented, your boots are misaligned, and you smell like regret. Are you sure you're the hero in this scenario? I get the job done. Hmm. She handed him a rock. Then protect this. It is sacred. He looked at the rock. It had googly eyes glued to it. Is this a joke? It's diplomacy. You've just been appointed guardian of Pebbles the Wise. Congratulations, he sighed. We're leaving. Now. Do you have snacks? No. I thought heroes had snacks. He hauled her over the lip of the crater and began the hike back to Knucklehead. Despite her royal attitude and space madness, she kept pace easily. Darren tried not to look at her ears, or the way her posture shifted with every step, as if calculating multiple escape routes at once. She wasn't just some kidnapped girl. He could feel it in his gut. And his gut was usually right, except about Derry. Halfway back, they ran into trouble. 3 drones dropped from the sky like metallic hornets, red lights flaring. Unauthorized personnel, one droned. Surrender the asset. The girl yawned. Darren fired first, hitting the left drone dead center. It spun out and crashed into a pile of scrap. The second one zipped right, charging up a pulse cannon. Cover your ears, he shouted. Which ones? She asked, ducking anyway. The pulse blast sizzled past her head and vaporized a chunk of terrain. Darren rolled, reloaded, and took down the second drone with a lucky shot. The third descended slowly, projecting a holographic message. Reward for live return of subject Ilara Ven. Do not damage. Do not engage, Darren froze. Ilara Ven? Oops, she said, pulling a slingshot from her satchel and nailing the drone's lens with a well-aimed nut. It spiraled and exploded in a ball of flame and sarcasm. You're a princess, he muttered. Technically, I'm the princess, but I prefer Ilara, or your highness of annoyance, if you're feeling formal. He stared. What in the name of Jupiter's hemorrhoids is going on? She gave him a look. That's a medical condition. You should get it checked. I thought you were kidnapped. I was. Then I unkidnapped myself. Now I'm temporarily self-employed as a fugitive monarch. He dragged a hand down his face. This job was supposed to be simple. Ah, the universe laughs at your plans. Can we just get to the ship? Lead on, Guardian of Pebbles. By the time they reached Knucklehead, Darren had added accidental royal bodyguard to his resume. The AI greeted them with a trumpet sound and a pop-up. Welcome back. Did you remember to buy milk? Ilara waved at the console. You must be Noodles. I hereby declare you my court jester. I accept, the AI said. Do I get a hat? Darren set course for orbit, locking down communications. He didn't know what was waiting for them out there. Royal fleets, bounty hunters, assassins, probably someone trying to sell royalty-themed merch. But he knew one thing. This wasn't a rescue mission anymore. It was a galactic mess. And somehow, he was stuck right in the middle of it. Noodles insisted on playing jazz whenever the ship entered hyperspace, and not the good kind. The saxophone wobbled like it was being played by a drunk algorithm, and Darren had given up trying to mute it after Ilara renamed the silence all sound function to royal snooze mode and locked it behind a riddle. The riddle involves 7 food groups, 3 extinct star systems, and a pun about frogs he refused to speak aloud. Jazz is the music of chaos, she said, lounging upside down across the co-pilot's seat. It's perfect for escape. You never know where the next note will take you. Yeah, well, if I survive this job, I'm reprogramming Noodles into a toaster. You'd have to outwit me first. I've already changed his operating language to Hyundelian. Darren narrowed his eyes at the console. The buttons now blinked in ornate calligraphy that might have been letters or abstract seafood. If I crash us into a sun, do I still get paid? Possibly, but your reputation as a galactic chauffeur will take a hit. They were heading for Rhetorus Station, a floating city that orbited the smog-choked gas giant Varnix 9. Officially, it was a trade hub. Unofficially, it was where spies went to drink, smugglers went to show off, and the truly desperate went to disappear. Darren knew someone there who owed him a favor, a retired admiral who ran a holographic jazz bar under the name Big Lenny. Rhetorus loomed ahead, its docking bays flickering with half-hearted welcome signals. The traffic was dense, freighters, couriers, and one enormous cruise liner shaped like a pineapple. Noodles commented on its inefficiency. Who designs a battleship with decorative fruit fronds? Someone with a sense of humor, Alara said. Someone who deserves to be fined, Darren muttered, angling the ship into their assigned quarter. They were granted clearance under the fake manifest Ilara had created, which listed their cargo as spiritual compost and live ferrets. No one asked questions. Once docked, Ilara insisted on picking her own disguise. Darren offered her a standard-issue cloak and glasses. She rejected both in favor of a shimmering pink flight suit with glitter panels and a visor shaped like a duck's beak. "I'm blending in," she said. "You're glowing." "Exactly. No one suspects the loudest person." Darren wore his usual coat and a face that screamed, "I don't want to be here." Together they descended into the artificial night of Ratara Station. Neon lights flickered overhead, and vendors hawked everything from black market memory drives to instant spouse kits. A man tried to sell them a genetically engineered houseplant that told bedtime stories. Ilara bought it. She named it Dennis. Big Lenny's jazzatorium was tucked into the underbelly of Sector 6. It flickered between realities. A holographic illusion maintained by temperamental projectors and a former admiral with an ear for trouble. Inside, the air was thick with false smoke and real tension. Hollow musicians played on stage, their instruments flickering out of sync with the beat. Ilara nodded in approval. Lenny recognized Darren immediately and didn't punch him, which counted as a warm greeting. They took a private booth in the back, where Lenny poured them drinks from a bottle labeled Emperor's Regret. "You've got guts showing your face here," Lenny said. "The bounty on her is 10 systems deep." "She's a client," Darren said. "She's a bomb," Lenny corrected. "That crown of hers? It could start a war if it shines in the wrong direction." "I'm not wearing the crown," Ilara said cheerfully. "I've hidden it in a place no one would look." Darren looked at her. "Inside Dennis," she said. Lenny stared. "The plant? He's very discreet." Lenny sighed like a man who had once commanded fleets and now served drinks to royalty in glitter suits. "Listen, kid, you're the real deal. Everyone's sniffing for you. The Concord wants you back, the Federation wants to control you, and the Black Banner Syndicate wants to sell you in cubes." "Cubes?" Darren asked. "Vacuum-sealed royalty. Very trendy with warlords." Ilara sipped her drink. "They'll have to catch me first and cube me second." Lenny leaned in. "There's a cruiser in Dock 12, old Telenis design, yours by bloodline, loyalists still embedded in its systems. You could take it, vanish into the Veiled Drift, or rally the old guard." "I don't want to rally anyone," Ilara said. "I want to eat snacks and avoid politics until I die peacefully on a beach made of cake." "You're the last Ven," Lenny said quietly. "You don't get to hide, not forever." Darren watched her carefully. Beneath the jokes and sparkles, there was tension, not fear, something heavier, like grief disguised as sass. "We'll think about it," Darren said. They left the jazzatorium an hour later. Ilara clutched Dennis. Darren scanned the crowds. Too many eyes, too many slow walkers. Paranoia hummed at the base of his spine. Then it happened. A flash of steel, a glint of red lens. A bounty hunter, half cyber, half goon, stepped from the shadows flanked by 2 insectoid mercs with grenade launchers for arms. "There she is," the goon rasped. "Live retrieval only." Ilara rolled her eyes. "Do I look dead to you?" "I can help with that," said one of the insectoids, raising its launcher. Darren pulled his blaster, shot the floor panel, and grabbed Ilara as the whole section dropped into the maintenance chute. They slid down 20 meters of oil-slick tunnel and crashed into a heap in a janitorial bay. Dennis landed softly beside them. "You okay?" Darren gasped. "My glitter suit is unharmed," she said. "Dennis is mildly traumatized." Noodles buzzed over comms. "You're trending on BountyNet. Caption reads, 'Royal Brat and Grumpy Dad escape again.'" "We need that cruiser," Ilara said, breathing hard. "I've changed my mind. Let's hijack it." Darren blinked. "What happened to beaches made of cake? Still the goal? This is just a detour." He helped her up. They ran for Dock 12. Behind them, bounty hunters regrouped. Ahead, destiny loomed with all the subtlety of a space opera soundtrack. And somewhere in the chaos, Dennis whispered bedtime stories about kings who vanished and queens who ran. Dock 12 was a graveyard dressed up as a warship. The thalanized cruiser loomed like a fossilized god, half buried in scaffolding and buzzing with half-interested technicians who were clearly paid in snacks and bad decisions. Darren squinted at the hull markings as they slipped through a security breach left open by someone who either had a death wish or was spectacularly bad at closing doors. Ilara glided beside him in a coat 3 sizes too big, holding Dennis like a royal scepter. Dennis had developed a mild tremor since the chute incident and occasionally emitted lullabies in binary. "This thing still flies?" Darren asked, ducking beneath an exposed coolant pipe that was labeled, "Definitely not leaking." "It's coded to Venn genetic markers," Ilara said. "That means me, and technically Dennis, since I fed him royal breakfast tea last night. Glad we're entrusting our escape to a plant in a tea ceremony. Dennis is deeply honored." The control deck was dusty and underlit, but the ship responded the moment Ilara placed her hand on the command pedestal. Lights flared, systems hummed, a smooth voice echoed across the chamber. "Princess Ilara Venn, welcome aboard the Luminara Ascendant. Would you like to initiate planetary destruction mode?" "No," she said. "We'll just start with a polite departure." Darren took the pilot's chair. It creaked ominously. "You ever flown something this big?" "I once parallel parked a moon barge between 2 Imperial yachts." "That true?" "Number but confidence is 90% of piloting." "What's the other 10? "Crashing fabulously." Alarms rang as they disengaged from the dock. Not internal, external. Rhetorist Station had realized who they were, or more accurately, who she was. Broadcasts swarmed the intercoms. "Attention unidentified cruiser, you are harboring a high-value fugitive." Then more aggressively, "Surrender the princess, and you will not be turned into subatomic pate." Darren flicked the switch labeled Run. The cruiser surged forward. 3 pursuit ships detached from the station, sleek models, fast and angry. The kind of ships piloted by people who had something to prove and mothers they disappointed. Ilara buckled in and activated the defensive grid. "Shield integrity is at 80%. "What happened to the other 20? "I used it to power the glitter generators." "Of course you did." A dogfight erupted just past the station's gravity well. The Luminara Ascendant wasn't fast, but she had bulk and centuries of passive-aggressive design choices. Automated turrets popped out from hidden panels and began peppering the enemy ships with ion bursts and spicy taunts. One of the pursuit vessels spun out after getting hit with a beam labeled "Courtroom Disappointment." "We can't outrun them forever," Darren said. "Then we changed the game." She pulled up a star map, highlighted a ripple in the veiled drift, and pointed. "This anomaly opens once every cycle. It's unstable, full of radiation, and probably haunted." "Sounds like your family reunion." "Exactly. If we dive through it and survive, we'll emerge in the azure veils. Uncharted space. No tracking signals, no politics, just cake beaches and Dennis." "And if we don't survive?" "We'll haunt them back." Darren grunted. "Fine. But if we die, I'm blaming you." "Then I'll die knowing I was memorable." They punched into the anomaly. Colors twisted. Time hiccuped. At one point, Darren saw a version of himself in a tuxedo teaching dance lessons to a squad of alien diplomats. He didn't mention it. Ilara laughed like a woman who'd ridden worse storms. The ship held together. Mostly. When they emerged, space was blue. Not metaphorically, literally blue. Streaks of azure light drifted across the stars like jellyfish in the void. No sign of pursuers, just stillness and the quiet hum of possibility. They hovered there for a moment, breathing. "Well," Ilara said, "we're officially off the map. You okay with that?" "I wasn't made for the throne. I was made for the run." "You were made for trouble." "That too." She stood, walked to Dennis, and gently retrieved something from the soil. A small, dull metal circlet. The crown. Bent and slightly sticky from root exposure. "I could have rallied the loyalists," she said. "Marched across systems, fought the pretenders. But what good is a queen if she forgets how to live? You think they'll stop looking for you?" "No," she said, "but now they won't find me." Darren leaned back. "You ever plan to go back?" "Maybe. When the galaxy forgets what my face looks like, and remembers what peace feels like. He stared at her for a while. Not the crown, not the ears, just her, smiling like she hadn't almost been vaporized multiple times in 72 hours. "You're not what I expected," he said. "I get that a lot." He extended a hand. "So what now, Your Highness?" She took it. "Now we explore. Find places without names. Teach Dennis to play cards. Maybe start a rumor that we're pirates." "I like that." "Of course you do. You look like you cheat at cards." The ship drifted deeper into the unknown, leaving behind war and crowns and all the words that had tried to define them. Somewhere a bounty network went dark. Somewhere else an empire scrambled to replace a missing heir with a hologram that glitched when asked about soup preferences. And in a quiet corner of the universe, a girl who had been a princess, a prisoner, and a punchline sat beside a mercenary who'd learned how to care about something besides credits. They didn't have a plan, but they had freedom. They had laughter. And they had Dennis, who, for the record, had just learned how to wink. It wasn't a perfect ending, but it was theirs. The dust didn't just hang in the air, it clung like guilt. Cade Mercer spat black grit into his glove, blinked through the orange haze, and cursed the atmospheric filters for the 8th time. The war had made a lot of promises: noble causes, clean battles, clear enemies. But breathable air wasn't one of them. He ducked beneath a collapsed transport wing, eyes scanning the twisted ruin for movement. His HUD flickered, static crawling across the bottom of his visor like tiny ghosts. Whatever orbital slug had knocked out the comm tower had fried half the electronics in the quadrant. Cade was alone now. Not in theory, not in that philosophical man versus universe way, but in the practical, depressing sense of, your evac shuttle left 20 minutes ago and you were too slow arguing with a wall panel to make it. "Nice one, Mercer," he muttered, shouldering his pulse rifle. "Stranded on a crater with no comms, no ride, and a knee that creaks louder than an old spacebar door. You really know how to impress the ladies." The silence answered with a soft wheeze. He froze. Not a wind gust, not rubble shifting, a wheeze. He pivoted, aiming down the cracked slope of fractured duracrete and hull fragments. There, half buried under what looked like the twisted remains of a fighter's heat shield casing, was a shape, pale, unmoving. He stepped closer, rifle raised, heart thudding. A corpse? Probably. Too many of those lately. But as he knelt beside it, brushing aside a smear of caked ash, the shape groaned. Not dead, not human. The ears were the first giveaway, long, slender arcs that curled slightly at the tips. He squinted at her face through the grime and blood, trying to place the species. Ava Larry. Had to be. Skin like polished ivory, too smooth for anyone grown on Earth or Mars, and hair like a filament of solar flare gold tangled across her face. She was badly wounded. Ribs, definitely broken. Right arm, twisted beneath her in a way that suggested she wasn't using it to wave hello. He should have left her. That's what the manual would say. Enemy combatant, probably dangerous, too risky, but the manual didn't account for the way her fingers were curled protectively around her abdomen. He leaned in. "Hey," he said, "you alive under there?" She didn't open her eyes, but her lips moved. He activated his translator. It fizzed, rebooted, crashed. "Figures." Kay dropped his rifle and started clearing debris. His joints protested every motion, but he kept going. She moaned, then gasped as he shifted a metal shard off her legs. She tried to fight, weakly, but the moment his hands touched her side, her eyes opened. They weren't like any he'd seen, pale violet, almost translucent, and filled with something between terror and fury. "Easy," he said, raising both hands. "I'm not here to hurt you. I'm just the unlucky idiot who didn't get on the evac shuttle." Her lips moved again. The translator, with all the grace of a drunk synth player, kicked in. "Touch me again, and I'll remove your organs in alphabetical order." "That's the thanks I get," he grinned. "You know, you sound like my ex." Except she alphabetized by pettiness, not internal systems. She stared at him like he was an idiot. Which fair. He grabbed a med patch from his belt, ignored her feeble protests, and pressed it to the worst gash along her rib cage. "You're bleeding too much. I can't carry you unless I stop it." "Why?" Help? Cade shrugged. Let's say I'm stupid. Or maybe I just have a thing for long ears. Her expression didn't change, but he swore he saw the ghost of a blink that might have been amusement. Getting her out was the hard part. The terrain was a mess: craters, burning fragments, twisted hulls, and the occasional stray plasma mine. He built a makeshift sled from a broken drone's wing and tied it to his waist with cabling. She lay limp, half-conscious, her breath shallow. He talked the entire time to keep himself from panicking. You know, this isn't how I imagined my day going. Thought I'd grab a ration bar, maybe yell at some lieutenant, then catch a ride home. Instead, I'm dragging royalty through a war zone. Are you royalty? You look royalty-ish. Or maybe that's just your cheekbones. She made a sound that could have been a cough or a laugh. You're delirious. Probably don't even understand me. That's okay. I talk to myself all the time. Did I tell you about the time I tried to kiss a medbot thinking it was a nurse? No. Good. That story strictly need to know. They made it to the evac point with minutes to spare. A shuttle, barely intact, looking more like a discarded beer can with wings, was prepping for launch. Cade shouted, waving his arms, and a soldier popped the hatch. You're insane, the pilot said as Cade dragged the sled inside. Tell me something new. Inside the shuttle, the med bay was laughably under-equipped. He stayed by her side, trying to clean the worst of the burns. She opened her eyes again, more aware this time. Name, she whispered. Cade. Sergeant Cade Mercer. She breathed in sharply. Your child. He blinked. Sorry, what? She touched her abdomen, barely able to lift her hand. Our child. Look, I don't want to sound rude, but I think I'd remember that. She coughed, winced. Brief time before war. I didn't know. Until now. The pieces clicked together like a badly built jigsaw. That night, that embassy ceasefire, the drinks that tasted like starlight, the laugh he remembered but never expected to hear again. Well, crap, he muttered, then louder with a weak smile. Guess I'm not just the rescue team. I'm the father. She didn't answer. She'd passed out again. He looked at her, then at the med bay ceiling, and sighed. You couldn't have just been a smuggler or something, huh? No, had to be a pregnant noble with an intergalactic political bomb in your belly. Great, just great. He sat down beside her, the shuttle rumbling under them as it punched through the upper atmosphere. The stars outside blinked into view, distant and uncaring. And Cade Mercer, accidental hero, possibly doomed father, and self-declared idiot, leaned back and muttered, Okay, universe, your move. The first thing she did when she woke up was dislocate a nurse's wrist. To be fair, the nurse had tried to stick a needle in her neck without warning, and in Sirotai's culture, that was roughly equivalent to proposing marriage and slapping your grandmother at the same time. The nurse screamed, the monitors screamed louder, and Cade, sitting cross-legged on a supply crate with half a protein bar in his mouth, fell off it with a yelp and a very undignified flail. She's awake, he called as if the chaos hadn't made that self-evident, and also possibly cranky. Security flooded the med bay, blasters drawn, armor plates clanking like a marching band of paranoia. Siratai sat upright, white blonde hair spilling across the hospital blanket, her long ears twitching like signal antennae under stress. Her eyes scanned the room with lethal calculation. She spotted Cade instantly, scowled and pointed at the nurse, who was cradling her arm and trying not to cry. Why was she trying to inject me with what appears to be dyed sewage? Siratai demanded, her voice like a glass blade. That's a nutrient drip, Cade said, pushing himself up. And you've been unconscious for 3 days, so maybe ease off the judo. I don't practice judo. Then I hope that nurse never meets anyone who does. She frowned, clearly still groggy. Her hand drifted to her abdomen. The child? Still with us, Cade said, his voice softening. Vitals are stable. Medical says he's growing like a champ. Or a warlord. I mean, considering the parents, I'd be worried if he wasn't already issuing orders through Morse code kicks. She blinked. He? Just a guess. Don't worry, I'm fully prepared to be wrong. That's kind of my brand. A doctor finally approached, hands raised in a universal gesture of non-stabbing, and Cade translated enough for Siratai to calm down and allow the scans. She didn't like the machines, called them soulless clatter leeches. Cade found that oddly charming. By the end of the day, the word had gotten out. She was alive. The child was alive. And the child's father was, somehow, inexplicably, an unshaven human sergeant with a limp and a growing collection of caffeine-fueled regrets. Diplomats arrived in waves, first from the human coalition, then from neutral star states, then from factions within the Evalari diaspora who had been presumed politically extinct for years. The term high kin was whispered with reverence and fear in every hallway. Siratai, it turned out, was more than just military royalty. She was the last surviving heir of an ancestral line tied directly to the Evalari Crown Council. Her child, by law and tradition, was next in line, which made Cade the father of an imperial heir. "So," he said, sipping lukewarm tea in the staff lounge, "does this mean I get a crown? Or do I just babysit the actual one until it's potty trained?" Siratai stared at him, unimpressed. "You'll need diplomatic clearance and full genetic recognition under Evalari law, and possibly to survive multiple assassination attempts." "Cool," Cade said. "So same as parenting in general." She didn't smile, but she didn't punch him either, so he took that as a win. They were relocated to a diplomatic fortress on the neutral world of Isar Prime, a place that tried very hard to look peaceful, but had turrets on every roof and shield drones humming above the gardens. Cade got a room with a view, which was really just a polite way of saying, "You'll be easier to snipe." He was given a formal suit that itched, a speechwriter who wept quietly into her datapad, and a security escort who referred to him as "Your Probable Highness." "I think you're enjoying this," Siratai said during one of their strategy meetings. She was reclining on a couch, one hand on her stomach, the other leafing through a tablet of human political profiles like she was judging contestants for an execution. "I'm enjoying being confused in new and exciting ways," Cade replied. "Yesterday I was a background character in someone else's war. Today I'm the potential tiebreaker for an empire. My career plan didn't have a step labeled intergalactic baby daddy, but here we are." She gave him a look. "Do all humans joke this much?" "Only the ones trying not to cry." A silence settled between them. Not cold, not warm. Something like the eye of a storm. Calm only because everything else was too loud to hear clearly. That night, someone tried to kill them. Technically, it was a diplomatic aide with a concealed neuropulse embedded in their sleeve. They never got close. Siratai noticed them the moment they stepped into the room, her instincts honed by years of battlefield command. Cade noticed them because they didn't laugh at his joke about interspecies child support. The aide was arrested. The room was locked down. And for the next 24 hours, they were kept under guard, together, in the same chamber. "So," Cade said, lying on the floor, staring at the rotating ceiling panels, "what's your favorite ice cream flavor?" "Ice cream?" He turned to look at her. "Oh no. Have you never had ice cream? I come from a culture that does not waste minerals on frozen sugar paste. That's criminal." She was quiet for a moment, then softly, "I do enjoy candied root nectar. It's similar to what you describe, but with more protein and less emotional trauma." Cade laughed. She didn't, but she tilted her head like maybe, just maybe, she was getting used to him. Later, as the fortress lights dimmed and the guards outside shifted positions, Siratai turned toward him in the soft blue glow of the biometric lamps. "This child," she said, "he will be neither Evalari nor human. He will be both. That is not something our histories have prepared for." Cade looked at her, the woman he'd met by accident, saved without thinking, and somehow ended up tethered to by fate, biology, and probably the worst odds in the galaxy. "I'm not sure history's ever ready for the good stuff," he said. "It always catches up after the fact, like a drunk uncle at a wedding." She closed her eyes. Her hand rested on her belly. He thought she was asleep until she whispered, "You will stay?" He didn't hesitate. "Yeah, I'll stay." Outside, the stars spun slow. Inside, the storm settled just a little more. The coronation was held on a platform hovering 500 meters above the Capitol, which Cade thought was unnecessarily dramatic for a baby who couldn't yet hold his own head up. "I'm just saying," he muttered, adjusting the ceremonial sash that felt like it was trying to strangle him in slow motion. "If you really need altitude to prove legitimacy, maybe the real problem is your PR team." "You're speaking aloud again," Siratai said, not looking up from her reflection as her attendants adjusted the silver circlet in her hair. "I've decided narration is the only thing keeping me from sprinting into the hills. You'd be shot before you reach the perimeter. That's half the appeal." She gave him one of her almost smiles. He lived for those now, like rare celestial events, unpredictable and quiet, but beautiful when they happened. She hadn't punched him in weeks, which he took as an emotional milestone. Their son, whose name had taken 3 full sessions of cross-cultural compromise to finalize, was officially Taryn Cale Mercer. Cale for an Evalari ancestor, Taryn for a war hero Cade once swore at during basic training, and Mercer, because Siratai said tradition demanded the child carry his father's name, and Cade hadn't stopped blinking since. The coronation chamber thrummed with anticipation. Dignitaries from across human and Evalari territories packed the tiers, some openly hostile, others cautiously supportive, most quietly trying to calculate whether this alliance would raise or tank their stock portfolios. Siratai stood with regal composure, holding their son in her arms. Cade stood beside her, half dressed like a politician, half feeling like a prop. The high elders spoke in a tongue that sounded like music and machinery fused into one. Cade didn't understand a word, but he'd learned to nod solemnly at the right parts. The ceremony ended with the symbolic imprinting of the child's genetics into the royal archive, an ancient crystalline data obelisk that floated midair and shimmered like liquid thought. Taryn squawked once during the process, farted loudly, and was immediately declared a child of destiny by an elder who claimed it was a sign of cosmic honesty. Afterward, there were feasts, political speeches, and enough toasts to turn even the most stubborn diplomat into a puddle of goodwill. Cade skipped most of them. He found a quiet terrace with a view of the twin moons and stood there, letting the wind mess up his hair. Siratai joined him later, barefoot, having escaped her entourage like a fugitive monarch on a mission. "You know," Cade said, "I never saw this coming. Not the Empire, not the kid, not you. You thought we would part ways after the war. I thought you'd kill me for seeing you cry that one time. I almost did." Silence again, but a warm one. "He's going to be something, isn't he?" Cade said, glancing back toward the chambers where their son slept under layers of bio-shielding, guard rotations, and one very nervous, robotic nanny who still glitched when asked to sing lullabies. "He already is," she said, "not just because of his bloodline, but because he is proof of something neither of our peoples wanted to admit possible. Interstellar diapers? Unity." He looked at her. She still had that sharpness, the edge of a warrior raised on discipline and duty, but it was softened now, tempered by something deeper. "Have you thought about what comes next?" he asked. "For us, I mean." "I have. It terrifies me." "Me too." They sat side by side, backs against the cool stone of the balcony, feet dangling over a drop that would make most men faint. "You've changed," she said almost casually. "I started brushing my hair. That counts. You carry yourself differently. You joke the same, but the fear beneath it isn't the same." He didn't answer for a while. Then he said, "I used to think being alone made me safer. If I didn't have ties, no one could use me, break me, leave me. But then you showed up half dead in a crater and called me a fool, and now I've got an heir to raise and 4 different galaxies monitoring my caffeine intake." "You're still a fool," she said. "Sure, but now I'm your fool." The stars above them blinked on, one by one. In the weeks that followed, the official unification process began. Long negotiations, shared technologies, dual embassies, and a media circus that included a documentary series titled Love in the Time of Plasma Grenades, which Cade never agreed to but somehow still starred in. He was assigned a liaison team, a security detail, and an etiquette instructor who fainted 3 times during their first session. But he also found purpose, working with displaced veterans, human and Evalari alike, advocating for policy reforms, speaking at education forums where kids asked questions like, "Do aliens eat pizza?" Siratai said no. Cade proved otherwise. Their relationship didn't fit neatly into any diplomatic model. Some called it a symbol. Others called it a scandal. They called it Tuesday. Eventually, someone asked if they'd marry. "We already did the hard part," Cade said. "Fell in love by accident, saved each other's lives, shared a child. Ceremony feels like a post-credit scene." But Siratai surprised him. She arranged a private vow exchange. No cameras, no fanfare. Just the two of them in a chamber overlooking the city, their son between them, cooing at shadows. Cade promised to never stop making her laugh, even if it took years. She promised to always listen, even when his words came wrapped in sarcasm. And they kissed, not as royals, not as symbols, but as people who had fought their way out of war, through fear, and into something neither fully understood, but both believed in. Years from now, when their son sat on the throne for the first time, he would tell the galaxy that his parents changed everything, not through force or treaties, but through something far rarer: hope, and a deeply inappropriate number of punchlines.